bright young woman in a single room. Being in the energy industry, and before that as an investment banker, it was rare that I come across another woman, so this is fun for me. Maybe what I'll start with is giving you a little bit of a sense of what my career trajectory has been, and some of the pearls of wisdom I've collected along the way. I'd like to share this with you, and then we can open it up for questions. I did get a preliminary list of questions, which would take me somewhere between 2 or 3 weeks to answer. So we'll just focus on the ones that come to your mind today. So very briefly, yeah, I was born in New Orleans. I grew up in Houston, and went to school at Memorial High School, and then went up to Harvard. Got my degree in economics. Then went to New York City and worked for a few years. And very quickly, I determined that trying to forge a career without an MBA was not going to be very easy. So I went back to Wharton and got my degree in finance, and went directly from there to Wall Street. 1982, that's when I went to Wall Street. It was a long time ago. It was really the kind of rough and tumble years. That was when junk bonds were so-called invented, when the hostile takeover was at its peak, when leveraged buyouts became all the fad. And in fact, it was a period of time that I think the whole Gordon Gekko movies was based on. It was, the whole greed is good, and it was an era of a great deal of innovation in terms of financial engineering, and made for a very challenging culture within investment banking. At that time, when I was at First Boston, it was one of the leading banks, and we had one female managing director out of the whole corporation, the whole firm. And she was made a managing director when I was there. And, it was the kind of thing that, what was it like to be a woman, to be a young woman in an environment like that? Well, first of all, I have to tell you, it was a hostile environment for everybody. It was just sort of that quintessential dog-eat-dog world where each person within the bank kind of viewed themselves as their own profit center. And it was all about how can I prove that I'm the star and get paid the most, as opposed to what you'd like to find, people working together for the better, for the good of the clients, the good of the firm. So from the first perspective, it was just a tough environment to be in. But then when you layer on top of that there were very few women involved, so that you didn't have many role models, you didn't really have any female mentors, it just made it that much more challenging. This was also, I remember this was kind of the olden days. When I was in high school, and I've told my niece Stephanie this many times, I was in high school, I graduated in 1973, and I remember telling people, oh, well, I'm not going to get married, I'm going to have a career. And so think about that. Women struggle today, how are they going to have a family and a career? Back then, it was sort of, you had a choice of getting married and having a career. Now, that's a bit of an exaggeration, but you'd never find anybody even thinking that way today. So the world has changed a whole lot. But I did learn a lot of positive things in investment banking that I think are worth touching on. It is a great place to start a career because as an investment banker, let me take a step back, because what's great, I know there's biomedical engineers here, and we've got applied math, and we've got all kinds of different degrees. So maybe y'all don't even know what finance is. So let me just take a step back. Investment banking is all about helping the efficient allocation of capital so that money is invested in those areas, in those projects that can generate the best returns. Projects generate good returns because people want the products or services that are developed or produced from those projects. So there is some greater good there. It's not all about Gordon Gekko and greed is good. It's about making sure that you have efficient capital markets so that the economy can grow. Okay, so that's actually pretty worthy and kind of exciting. It's fun to be a part of it. In investment banking, you work with lots of different clients from lots of different industries. Everything from the steel industry to cars to oil industry to telecommunication companies, etc. So you get to see lots of different industries, and you also work for lots of different bosses, particularly when you're an associate right out of business school. So you get to see lots of different leadership styles. And the important thing about that is that everybody has their own style. And there is no such thing as a single style that's successful. And I've seen it happen, and there's nothing worse than when you see this person who's the boss, who's very, very successful, but kind of a jerk, and a young person working for him and emulating him. that boss because the boss is successful. But the boss is a jerk, and you don't have to be a jerk to be successful. And this is not limited to investment banking. I see this to this day. And that is just, it's just a shame. So the good thing about investment banking is you don't have a single boss. And you see lots of successful people who do it their own way, the way they're comfortable doing it. And so you get to see these different styles, and you kind of pick and choose which attributes from this person kind of fit with my personality. What does that person do that's particularly successful? So you try to learn from each of those leaders. How can you formulate your own strategy and make progress in that way? The other thing I learned in investment banking was how to communicate well. I worked for the head of the investment bank, the corporate finance department, which was at the time the most important part of the bank. He was the leader of that, but he also had client coverage. And we together covered these companies, whether it was Chrysler, Armco Steel, DuPont, some very, very major corporations. And you got to dial back the clock 30 years to kind of put that in perspective. I mean, you think Armco Steel, who cares? Chrysler, kind of, wannabe. But 30 years ago, these were like the preeminent corporations in America. This fellow was busy. He'd come into the office, and I'd have 5 minutes where I knew I'd only get 5 minutes of his time, and I knew I had at least 3 presentations I was working on. And I could get answers from him that I could use so that I could then go back and do 3 days worth of work before I get to see him again. So what that meant was I thought about, what is the information I really need? And how do I ask for it in such a way that it's usable? Right? Because times when you ask somebody, you go and you ask them a question, they give you the answer, and you go back to your desk and you kind of think, wait, that's not the information that I needed to move forward. So it made me really think through, what am I trying to achieve in the communication? So what kind of answers are you looking for? But probably more importantly than that, I only had 5 minutes to get the questions out. So I had to be very succinct and very much to the point. And that remains my communication style, and that's what I'm working on my patience. That's not quite good yet. So communication is important. And it's both written communication as well as speaking. And that's where forums like this are so important, that even if you're just giving an introduction, you get to stand up in front of a group of people, most of whom you don't know, and you have to talk with confidence. And anyone can be a good public speaker. Just takes practice. Just takes practice. So I would encourage each of you, even as you're still students, to take advantage of any opportunity you have to speak in front of a group, whether it's your class, whether it's in your colleges, various organizations there. It just makes sense to get in front of people and talk, and then you realize it's just not that hard. But it is important. It does make a big difference. So anyway, I was in investment banking for a long time, very, very competitive internally, where you had a lot of people who were very focused on their own success, and did not find it that terribly satisfying. It was about trying to capture the deal, so it was a lot of selling in a sense. So you got the transaction, and then you moved on to the next one. And what I determined was that I would really rather be part of a team building a company. And sort of fast forward, I had the opportunity to move back to Houston with First Boston, which is great for me, because it was my home. But when I was in Houston, I focused even more on oil and gas. I thought of myself as a generalist, but there's so many companies here that are in oil and gas, it just made sense, and it turned out that way, that I was going to do oil and gas. Which is a very interesting industry. My dad was in oil and gas, so I already had some affinity for it. What I found in the Houston office, First Boston, I said one of the great benefits of working in investment banks, you have a lot of different bosses. Well, that's true when you're in headquarters. If you're in a small regional office, you got about 12 professionals in total. I was the only woman in the office, and the head of the office was from New York. Because sometimes I talk about this and people go, oh yeah, good old boy from Texas. No, this fellow was from New York, but it just made him nervous to be around a woman. And I had a peer who he just really liked, my peer, and they'd go golfing together, and they'd go out to dinner with their wives, and oh, by the way, he'd invite all the clients, and not me. And it was the informal networking, the informal communication that I missed out on. My peer would get to go to dinner with my clients, but I wouldn't get invited. There came a point where I tried to quit once, because the way investment banking works is you get paid a reasonably small salary, but you get a big bonus once a year. and it's subjective. And so you get to the point where you get that big bonus, and you go, am I going to stay for another year? So I had that conversation with myself a couple of times, and then finally I won. And I told myself, no, I've had enough of this. It's, you make so much money, but are you really enjoying what you're doing? And so I decided to quit. And so my boss, got sent up to New York to get talked out of it. And my boss called me and he said, now look, Janet, I know what the problem is. It's job satisfaction. It's my fault. You come on back here. Come on back here. It was a Friday evening. Come on back here. Take the weekend off and just give me a chance to be a good boss. Take the weekend off. Being generous, huh? And then, to show he was trying. He was very honest. He was trying. And so the next weekend, he was saying, well, the rest of us, we work 6 days a week. You need to be here on Saturday. Well, what if I get my work done on Friday? Everybody else is here Saturday, so okay, come in Saturday. 7 a.m., Saturday morning. Think about that. If any of you want to be investment bankers, and so after about an hour of doing some work, they all get up and go to the gym to play basketball. Now, they invite me to go because they're an inclusive group, right? Made me cover the biggest guy, which, I couldn't have covered the smallest guy, it's the truth. So that was the olden days. And stuff like that, yeah, it still kind of happens today, but nothing like it used to happen. So what you face today in a male-dominated environment is much more subtle than that. It doesn't mean that it doesn't exist, and that you don't have to focus and be aware of it and counteract it. But it's a lot better today than 20 plus years ago.